Hello, everyone. My name is Sharon Bonney. I'm the CEO of the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, and it's a real pleasure to be with you here today presenting. We have a wonderful webinar lined up for you, and it is called Working Together, How Adult Educators and Workforce Development Boards Must Collaborate for Adult Learners. So I'd like to just mention that we have Empira with OneFlow. That's our sponsor today, and this webinar is generously sponsored by them, and we're able to provide this free of charge to our members. So I'm going to take a minute here to stop sharing my screen and introduce you to Shanti from Empira. Shanti?
Whoops. Hi, everyone, and it's great to have you all here on this webinar. And I wanted to take a few minutes to just share a little bit about Empira and what we can do in this space, hopefully to provide some resources for you all. So Empira OneFlow is a platform for success for WIOA. It's a case management platform, but we've been around for a long time. Since 2003, we've been working with workforce development, and then more recently got into adult ed. My background is working with workforce development consortiums and different organizations. And the reason that I feel that it's so relevant for us to be here in this event today is because we provide the platform to enable it to happen. So how does this happen? So OneFlow helps consortiums or ecosystems of different organizations that are trying to work together to succeed. And of course, there's a lot of different aspects of this collaboration, which you'll be hearing from the other speakers today. But we bring the technology platform to enable this to happen. And OneFlow provides this shared data system that allows multiple organizations, workforce boards, to make referrals to adult education, to their community partners, and for the adult schools to make referrals back to workforce development and to colleges when students want to transition. And in one ecosystem, we're able to bring all that data together so we can look at recording outcomes, eliminating the silos, streamlining and optimizing the processes. So as you hear more about the other aspects of working together between workforce development and adult ed, we bring that platform to enable this to happen. And we'll talk a little bit more about how this works after the end of the presentation by the speakers today. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shanti. Appreciate that. And so now I wanted to introduce you to today's presenter, which is Jesse McCree. So Jesse, if you'd like to turn on your video. Jesse McCree is the CEO of SC Pennsylvania Works, the Regional Workforce Development Board, whose mission is to unlock the human talent that drives the development of businesses and individuals, creating opportunity for growth and prosperity in the South Central Pennsylvania region. Under Jesse's leadership, the organization invests over $17 million of public funds annually, supporting a labor force of over 740,000 people. The organization also invests in, evaluates, and advances high-impact workforce development programs, training centers, and policies that drive regional economic growth by connecting the needs of businesses and job seekers. Jesse is currently enrolled in Harvard Kennedy School of Executive Education program for nonprofit leadership and serves on numerous boards of community organizations as well as national, including PA Workforce Development Association, Coalition on Adult Basic Education, and the U.S. Conference of Mayors Workforce Development Council. We are really excited to have Jesse here today. And Jesse, I just want to say thank you for making time for this. I know you're so busy, and we really appreciate it and know it will be a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks for the introduction. And next time I'm going to edit to make sure that COABE is first on my list of organizations. I've loved working with COABE. It's just been edifying, enlightening, and I've gleaned a lot from the experts in the adult education field. So thank you for having me today here, Sharon. So.
You're welcome. And I'm so glad you're here. And I'd love everyone to welcome you in the chat box and then put questions in the Q&A. So I'm turn this over.
That's great. Thank you so much. If there are any issues with audio or video, we've got some great support behind the scenes from COABE. So please let me know if anything comes up. But again, Sharon, thank you so much for this opportunity to share. And thank you for you all for taking time out of your busy days to talk a little bit about working together, about how adult education and workforce development really have to collaborate in this environment for the betterment of our communities and for the betterment of adult learners across the country. As Sharon mentioned, my name is Jesse McCree, and I've had the privilege of serving on the COABE board now for the past 2 years. And I think my whole goal in this presentation today is for us to take a look at how it's so important for us, not just from a compliance standpoint, but really from a strategic standpoint, for us to do right by our learners and for our job seekers in our communities to be able to work together. The systems connections is not easy work. What I'd like to do in this presentation today is talk a little bit about the why and the how of collaboration. Probably most importantly, why collaborate? And then we'll take a little bit of time and walk through what I'll call sort of a theory of change in the sense of having workforce boards and adult education institutions maybe change the way that we need to do business a little bit in order to work better together and to be able to collaborate for the betterment of our communities. So let's jump into this with the sort of the overview, a little bit about what South Central PA Works does. And Shanti, thanks for that great overview before this. And I think I'm interested in continuing sort of a conversation about how workforce boards and adult education institutions can do more in terms of having a platform to share this work together. But for those that aren't as familiar, workforce development boards are all about convening. We're about convening job seekers, employers, and what we refer to as partners. When we talk about partners, we're speaking about everything from adult education and higher education to economic development to our nonprofit organizations in our community-based organizations that help us to deliver services. For us in South Central Pennsylvania, we're based out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is the capital. And our mission really is to see that there is the human talent that we need to help unlock that drives the development of businesses and individuals. We build networks of business partners, economic development, higher education, and adult education to create a network for our job seekers and our employers to either get the skills that they need to compete, or if you're an employer, to be able to tap into the talent pipeline that we can help support for our region. We serve youth and young adults all the way up to displaced workers and everything in between. And as we look at investing, advancing, and evaluating these high impact workforce development programs, it's so important for us to learn about what is working, what's working well, and how we manage that. So as Sharon mentioned, we have about $17 million in resources, both from the federal and state level, that we invest locally in an 8-county region in South Central Pennsylvania to put people to work, to help businesses find talent, and to help people not just get a job, but really connect them to a career. And I think why this work is so important with adult education is that's what you all are working on every single day. This isn't just about getting a job and taking home a paycheck so much as it is, you want to get a job that then is leading to a career pathway. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But in terms of South Central PA Works as a workforce development board, we have about 750,000 people in the labor force in our region that we're serving. So even though we are sometimes thought of as a rural part of Pennsylvania, we've got 750,000 people in our labor force that we're working on. So really to, as the journalists will say, not bury the lead, these are the 5 takeaways that I'd love to have for today's webinar. And if I do my job well, we can stay on task with these 5 takeaways as well as possible. Number 1, and this is a little bit of preaching to the choir, but the importance of our work together. You all see every day the importance of the work in adult education and related fields, but I want to reemphasize how important this is, particularly now more than ever, for us to work together. Silos make my life difficult in terms of the 9 to 5, and probably it would make your life difficult. But ultimately, I think we need to take more of a customer-centered design thinking and think about the people who are coming into our classrooms, who are taking classes, trying to get the GED, trying to get the high sets, trying to get a job and a career, coming into our American Job Centers. The silos hurt them more than anyone else. The importance of our work together is so critical. Number two, hopefully some practical steps to build some better relationships with your local workforce boards. I'll also say this too, I've been struck in my time on the board of COABE to see that the collaboration between workforce boards and adult education is not happening, in my estimation, is not happening as well as it could across the country. And I think that's both parties' responsibility to reevaluate how do we build a better relationship with our local workforce boards and with our adult ed providers. Number three, some tangible ways to collaborate. Hopefully we'll be able to walk through some practical ways that we here in Harrisburg have been able to build some strong partnerships with adult education. We'll also walk through a model of a program or series of programs that we built here, and hopefully telling that story of how we built over about 3 years these programs that have been wildly successful. We're hoping that will be a good example and hopefully a best practice for you all to glean some information from. And then finally, some future ways to work together. So I wanted to spend a few minutes here to sort of set the context and the state of play with regards to what environment we're working in collectively right now. And I like to start sometimes with this slide, and it's entitled "The Fading American Dream." This is some really great research that's coming out of Harvard University, and this shows the percent of children earning more than their parents by the year of birth. So if you go back to, if one was born in the 1940s, there's above a 90% chance that they, born in 1940, are earning or will earn more than their parents when they enter the labor force. As you see that steady trend down to where I'm at, which is right around 1985, to see that it's about a coin flip. It's about a 50-50 chance that children earn more than their parents. Now, what does this tell us? This tells us that there is this American dream that has been promoted and instilled, and I think to a large degree, it's one of the things that makes America great. It's a great place to be, it's a great place to live, and a great place to work, and to chase that dream of a better life for your children. The reality is that we are in a situation of very high income inequality and very low socioeconomic mobility. And when we look at very, very high rates of income inequality and very low rates of socioeconomic mobility, what we see is that the American dream is a coin flip right now in terms of the children that have been born in the last 30 years. When we look at this, this is a challenge for the work that you all are looking at every single day. On average, adults at the lowest levels of literacy are almost 10 times more likely to be living below the poverty line, 10 times more likely. How important is education, and how important is adult education with regards to literacy and numeracy and what we would sometimes refer to as soft skills or work-ready skills or essential skills? These are critical skills that are great proxies for determining whether someone is more likely to be living below the poverty line. The reason I bring this up is because for the people that come through South Central PA Works American Job Centers, and for the people that you are serving every day, a lot of times it is the population that is had the fewest resources, the fewest opportunities, the lowest levels of literacy. They live in zip codes that has to some degree been hindrances and obstacles to them growing in that American dream chart, moving up the socioeconomic mobility charts. And I think it's really important for us to say that this work is so important because of the state of play that we're in. Here in Pennsylvania, I was pulling these numbers together last week, 13% of adults here just in Pennsylvania lack basic literacy skills. And I would be fascinated to know what these percentages are across the country. But I do know that in Pennsylvania, we are serving a big chunk of the folks that are coming in this 13% lacking basic literacy skills are coming into our job centers looking for jobs. And ultimately, what we're charged with doing is not just getting them jobs, but the training and the education for careers. Again, just a little bit more on the setting the context here. One interesting thing with regards to this American dream is that I think there's been this impression over the past 20 or 25 years that in order to be successful, one absolutely must get a college degree. Now, to some degree, no pun intended, a four-year degree is going to be very helpful for many people depending on the career that they're choosing. But as you see here, a majority of jobs in America right now require skills training that's beyond a high school diploma, but it's not a four-year degree. And you think about this, the population and the groups of people in our communities that you all are serving every day, many of them probably fit into this category where they're going to need the high school diploma. They're going to need the high school diploma equivalent, but they may not necessarily need a four-year degree to get a good career. In fact, the majority of jobs in America right now are in what they refer to as the middle skill jobs. And I don't love the term, but the skills training that's more than a high school diploma, but less than a four-year degree. And as we see that one of the challenges in working together that I think is such a fertile ground for collaboration is the fact that workforce boards are finding that there are too few workers that can access the skills training that's needed to fill these in-demand jobs. So in the second graph, you see that there is an excess workers for four-year degree, and there is an excess number of workers for high school equivalency jobs. But where the gap is in this middle skills training, where there's 43% of workers that have the skills, but there are 52% of the jobs that are needed. That, to me, that middle area, that skills training, is where workforce boards and adult education can really think about why collaboration makes so much sense. This is also to say nothing of the time that we're in right now in this pandemic COVID-19 world. This all would have been very relevant 6.5 months ago. But now as we look at COVID-19 and the impact in our labor market, there has been a disproportionate impact on the ALICE population. And for many of you, you're familiar with this term ALICE, which is, it's an acronym for asset limited, income constrained, and employed. So asset limited, income constrained, and employed. The ALICE population are what we would refer to as the working poor. They don't have a lot of assets. They're income constrained with low wage, or in some cases, low wage, low skill work that does not have career pathway opportunities, but they are employed, they're working. The disproportionate impact of COVID-19 has been heavily burdened on this working poor population. COVID-19 has also catalyzed this digital literacy divide. And remote work, by the way, is just the beginning of this. When people talk about remote work, it's part of it, but it's not the full picture. Remote work is just the beginning of how this digital literacy divide will really catalyze changes in the labor market. Consider a warehouse, of which there are many in South Central Pennsylvania, a warehouse that is moving goods, packages, boxes from Pennsylvania to all over the country. Increasingly, we're seeing that the workers there, the pickers, the packers, the forklift drivers, increasingly that's being automated. It was already moving that way anyways, but then you add COVID-19 and you think, hey, a robot or AI or automation doesn't get sick and doesn't need to call days off. So we were already moving towards here, but I believe that COVID-19 will just catalyze and accelerate some of these changes. And then I think it's important, as we're looking as workforce boards and adult educators, about this, what we call the vulnerability index. What jobs will survive a post-pandemic world? We as a workforce board ask this question every day. We don't want to be investing in jobs that are going to be going away tomorrow. We want to invest in careers, and importantly, the training and the education to get those careers that we believe 5-10 years from now will be as viable as ever. It's impossible to predict the future, but I think you all would see that as adult education organizations are looking at building a foundational skill set that then can lead to healthcare jobs, STEM jobs, related fields like that we believe have staying power in the long term. Okay, so working together, workforce boards and adult education. That sounds easy, doesn't it? So we talk about collaboration a lot. It's a word that I probably overuse. I think one of the challenges with it is we know the word, we're familiar with it, we use it a lot, but what does it really mean? I would argue that for adult education and workforce boards, collaboration is a term that is built into the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So as the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which drives a lot of the work for WIBs like ourselves, there is what I'll call a compliance element of collaboration. Hey, we have to work with our Title II partners, adult education, literacy councils, et cetera, in our region, because the law tells us that we have to. But I would argue that there really are two reasons that we collaborate. One is for compliance. That is to say, we have to. But the bigger and more important reason for collaboration is strategic. That is, it's changing the lives of individuals and families and institutions and communities. We do right by our communities by working together strategically. So I've kind of laid out here 4 different areas of collaboration. The first is performance, and I would put this more in the compliance category. WIOA, as a law, requires that we have these shared common measures. As a workforce board, I look to my adult education partners, my Title II providers, and I say, hey, we are being measured on the exact same performance metrics. That means we really need to work together for the benefit of both of our respective organizations. There's also operational, and I think the last 3 gets to more of the strategic side of collaboration. Stronger referrals between the American Job Centers and our literacy councils. Data sharing that happens. Hey, we just saw this person that came into one of our job centers looking for work, and we shared data regularly, and we realized that John Doe has been actually working with the York Literacy Council. We pick up the phone, we call York Literacy Council and say, hey, how can we help work together so that we serve John Doe in the best way? With regards to service, we're serving learners and we're serving job seekers in a sort of a pandemic environment right now. We already were moving towards how do we reach more people without having to necessarily bring them into our classroom or necessarily bring them into our job centers. So we're looking at ways that we can serve our community in the best way. We do that, I believe, in a way with adult education that is more collaborative because we're ultimately probably serving, in many cases, the same group of people in our community. And then finally, funding. We'll get to this in a minute when we look at our best practice example here in South Central PA, is at the end of the day, we can go fast by ourselves, but we go further together. And with regards to funding, we've made some really important requests, and we've been funded for some really important projects because we as a workforce board believed that we couldn't do this without our adult education partners. So innovation, new creative funding sources are something that we can do together. As I mentioned before, and for the folks on the webinar who may work at workforce boards, who are part of some of the national associations that I'm a part of, I would love to hear your feedback on this. This is my candid opinion. Workforce boards are not doing enough to work more collaboratively with adult education. This has been, and Sharon and I have talked about this a lot, that's been in some cases my singular focus in being on the COABE board is I'm really encouraged to think about what we can do if we did more together in a more collaborative way. And I've been surprised in talking with my colleagues about how little collaboration there truly is with adult education. So I have high expectations in the years to come that we can do more together. I wanted to, and I hope this slide makes sense, and I hope there's some edification that comes from it. I wanted to take 2 minutes and just walk through what makes a workforce board tick. What does a workforce board director think about? And the reason I wanted to frame this up is for you all out there that may say, hey, I've reached out to my workforce board, or I've been to meetings before, and I have no idea what our WIB does. I have no idea how their work is relevant to our work. I think it may be helpful just to think about what makes our organization tick. So number one is funding. And I'll say this, 80 to 85% of the contacts that I get in email or phone calls in my day is about money. Give me money. I want money. I'm looking for funding. And it's kind of interesting. I'm grateful for the resources that our organization has. But for better or for worse, people reach out to workforce boards for money. We'll get to this in a minute. If you are looking to build a better relationship with your local workforce board, I would say probably the best way to start is not going after the money side of it. We all are looking for funding. We're all looking for more resources, but workforce boards are bombarded with requests. funding is going to be something we'll get to later. We need money to make our programs work, but don't start with funding, as workforce boards get overwhelmed with those requests. Number two, we, as a workforce board, embedded in our name is work. We are driven by high priority occupations. In Pennsylvania, we call it the HPO list, high priority occupations. And it's really a list that guides what jobs we can use our WIOA funds for. If it doesn't fall on that high priority occupation list, we really are limited in how much funding we can really use to support training and education for those occupations specifically. So number two would be, find out, if you don't know already, what your local list of high priority occupations are. It's probably going to be referred to as something different in every state, but that type of list, what is the HPO list in your local state or region that your workforce board is using? The other thing too that we're thinking about is throughput. Based on some of the requirements in WIOA, when someone enters our system, we are looking for placement as soon as possible. This is an area that I think we can grow in and work better with adult educators with regards to, there are times where the job seeker actually shouldn't be entered into our services first. They should go over to an intermediate unit, a literacy council, some other adult education provider, and get the skills training that they need. And then when they're job ready, come to our American Job Center and enter in. Because once they enter our system, we really are looking for placement as quickly as possible, because we're measured on how well we do in putting people into work. So this is something where we could talk a little bit about the sequence of services with regards to, do you get the education first and then you go to your American Job Center to start looking for the work? And then also, I wanted to throw this in there, we're more focused than sometimes people think. As you all know, serving the hardest to serve is hard. And we've got to have a pretty candid conversation in our communities about adult education and workforce boards, but also the nonprofit community and the philanthropic community, daycare and childcare and transportation and other supportive services that go into getting people sustainable jobs and careers. It's hard work that's in front of both of our parties. So if workforce boards and adult education can do more together, then what's our theory of change? All right, Jesse, if you think that workforce boards and adult ed can do more together, well, then how do we get there? We get the why. What's the how? Well, here's a framework for working together. Some of this sounds perhaps a little bit 101 or basic, but we'll walk through it and hopefully it will provide a framework for the how of working together. The first thing is getting to know each other. And relationships take time to build, and we as human beings sometimes aren't always the most patient of creatures. It takes time to build a relationship. When I first started at this job 4 years ago, I had it in my mind that I was going to go around and take the first month and meet everybody and make the connections, and then we would be good to go, right? We can get past the handshakes and everything and just get down to the work at hand. Relationships take time. Get to know each other. First of all, who's your workforce board? Who are the PA CareerLink, or American Job Center site administrators? Who are the contacts at the high level at the workforce board, and who are the contacts at the ground level to actually get stuff done? And get to know each other. Take the time to get to know each other. The other thing too is getting to know what makes each other tick, I think is really important. As I listened to literacy councils and to adult education providers, I realized I didn't know anything about the field. I realized that I knew instinctively it was about educating, and I knew it was about getting diplomas or credentials or high school equivalencies, but I didn't realize what these organizations needed to do in order to work and survive every day. So get to know each other and listen. Also, I'll add this, go to a workforce board meeting. And if you haven't already, take an hour or a couple hours and listen in at your next local workforce board meeting and find out who's who and who's making the decisions and what their priorities are and what their strategies are. You'll glean a lot from that if you haven't already done that. The second one here is think strategy and then think funding. Here's a question that I'm trying to be more disciplined and asking my friends and family and at work too, is what can we do to help you? Again, back to the question before, we're all looking for funding. We're all looking for resources. When I get the request for more money, I'm thinking, well, I'm going to put you in the category of, I've got too many funding requests and not enough money to go around. If you approach me and say, hey, like, I see what tell me what the workforce board's working on. How are you tackling these problems with COVID-19 and the displacement of so many workers, a lot of frontline workers that don't have the basic literacy skills that they need? How are you tackling this, and how can we help you do that? That's a really big question. Now I want to engage with you on, well, I've been thinking about this. I mean, what about our formerly incarcerated population? What about these employers that I talked to recently that are looking of doing on-site customized adult education classes at their location for their workforce that needs ESL classes? Now we're thinking strategy. Now we're thinking, how do we tackle these problems together? The funding will get there. We'll get to funding, but think strategy first. The money will be there when the good ideas and the collaboration are there. Identify innovative pilot programs. This can be a Google search. This can be reach out to Sharon and the COABE team and ID solutions, maybe across the country, that have been innovative pilot programs. The one we'll talk about in a few minutes, the Integrated Education and Training Program, IBEST, is a great example of that. You just want to identify the organizations that have done this really well. And hey, there's no shame in borrowing, right? We're all looking at tackling these problems together. And so identify what's out there, maybe across the country, and evaluate whether it's happening in your local region, and figure out, how do you network and how do you build a strategic thinking team in your region to say, we need to run such and such a program here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So ID solutions for regional challenges, and think about how you scale it. Now we get to number 4, joint funding requests. Okay, so now we get to talk about money. It's going to take money to do this, but working together in a very practical way is, we in South Central Pennsylvania did more work with our adult education providers, our outstanding adult education providers, because they had the ideas. They came to me and they said, how can we tackle these problems together regionally? And then now we go find the organizations or the state governments or the philanthropic organizations to go fund these requests. So better together. I think, grant applications are always going to be more powerful when you have a fully formed and well thought through network of partners to deliver these services. The 5th one then is communicate, share, talk about it, talk about the great work that you're doing, share data with your workforce board, have your workforce board share data with you, build a relationship so that when programs happen and they're successful, the community knows about it, your board knows about it, the workforce board knows about it, and that communication and those communication channels are then built out and shared. And I think that success ends up breeding more success. Okay, I'd like to take maybe 6 or 7 minutes here and just talk a little bit about the adult education and South Central PA Works partnership that we've been able to build. And we've really had the privilege of being able to build with our great Title II partners here in South Central Pennsylvania. To not bury the lead, again, to use that term, but when I started 4 years ago, I know that our organization and the Adult Education Coalition had been working together on a couple different projects. So this was not something that was brand new, and I was grateful to kind of walk into a situation that had been already built for me to some degree. But given the labor market challenges around 2015, 2016, we as the workforce board, South Central PA Works, and our education providers for adult ed, recognized that we needed to have stronger integration and better collaboration together. And the South Central Adult Education Coalition was essentially the byproduct of that. And the Adult Ed Coalition would meet on a quarterly basis. We would talk about what each other's respective organizations were doing. We would talk about what was happening in the labor market. We would talk about the different programs or potential pilot programs that they were looking at. And ultimately, we were trying to explore how collaboration really looked in real time. A lot of candid conversations happened during those first couple of quarters when I had started about some of the challenges with service delivery and the partnership itself. These candid conversations were kind of what we talked about before. Hey, Jesse, we think that South Central PA Works is kind of operating a little bit in a silo, or we had this great idea a couple years ago. We had this program that was all ready to go, but we don't feel like the workforce board really got it. I don't feel like they really understood why we were doing this. So we talked about a lot of different things. And I think those candid conversations were really healthy. I would encourage you all, collaboration is only going to happen when everyone's really candid about what's happening regionally and how we're working together or not working very well together. A couple of things that popped up in these first couple of conversations were, should we co-locate? We have 6 job centers in our region. As I mentioned, it's a pretty wide-ranging geographic region. What about co-location? Would collaboration actually be improved if we had, the literacy council right down the hall, so to speak, from our workforce board services in Title I under WIOA, and they were right in the same building? Data sharing. What do we mean by data sharing? I'm talking about, are we serving the same individuals in a GED program, and then they're turning around a week later and coming right back to the same office to look at a job? Perhaps we could do a lot more in having those career advisors and those case managers working more closely in concert for the betterment of the learner and the job seeker. So the Adult Education Coalition's really provided resources and guidance and leadership around building impactful programs, because what we're interested in is not just propping up another program, but having a program that means something, that changes the lives of the individuals we're serving, and then has sustainability. It lasts. It's beyond us funding it every single year. It continues almost in perpetuity because the program itself is impactful. So back to that question. Hey, what can we do to help each other? Instead of us thinking about our organizations exclusively and the numbers we got to hit and the funding we've got to secure and the resources we need, how would we work together? For us, we asked a lot of questions, and the Adult Education Coalition, Tim Shank and Cheryl Heister and Sharon Hagenberg, who now sits on our board, and Bobby Andaleo from the York Literacy Council. I don't know if these folks are on the webinar either. I hope they are, and I hear the shout out, but just a phenomenal group in our Adult Education Coalition. And they approached me in 2017, and they told me about this thing that I'd never heard before. And this shows my ignorance of adult education at the time. Integrated Education and Training, IET. And it really was contextualized learning. It was training for high priority occupations. Again, that's speaking my language as a workforce board director, but it's contextualized classroom learning in light of the job that they are training for. So we put our heads together, and I asked the Adult Education Coalition to frame up what a grant might look like. They did that, and we took the bones of that structure, that framework, and we went to the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry, and we got a $300,000 grant to support individuals with low basic skills and have them complete middle skill training that would lead to in-demand credentials and family supporting jobs. And we were successful in the grant. Now, as you all know, a lot of times we have the best intentions when we start a grant. We end up getting into the grant, we realize this is more challenging than we thought. And so you end up just trying to spend the money and hit your numbers and do the closeout packet and move on. But because of the work that we had built together, I really felt like the why IET had buy-in both from our organization at the Workforce Board and with the Title II adult ed providers. And so I think it was really successful. To give you a sense of what this looked like, this was the Venn diagram. Y'all remember the Venn diagrams from back in school? My 5-year-old daughter just started kindergarten last week, and we're already talking about Venn diagrams, and I love it. It's the overlap of the training programs for the high priority occupations and the training programs that the educators said had high dropout rates. So we're looking at programs that had high dropout rates and the overlap with the HPO list. And that's where we targeted our training programs. Certified nursing assistants, welding, medical assistants and billing, mechatronics. There was a whole list of others as well, but that was the Venn diagram that we pulled together. And we targeted investment in programs that had, importantly, supportive services, career paths, mentoring support, etc. And really the idea of IET was to shorten the time path to industry recognized credentials, certificates, and degrees. So this was an idea that was a best practice from many parts of the country that were doing this, including Washington State. They were doing it very well. And the Adult Ed Coalition educated me on why IET actually made sense for the Workforce Board to support. So we were successful in this grant. We got $300,000, and we had a phenomenal group and network of partners to actually deliver the services. So not only was the program a huge success, but the partnership between South Central PA Works and our Adult Ed partners, our Adult Ed Coalition, it really did something that I think is almost like a unicorn in this world of funding and resources and grants. We demonstrated a sustainable and impactful model for other funders. When our organization funds a program, I'm always mindful of, if I don't have the money next year, or if funding priorities change, or if I don't have the ability to support this program in the same way as I did this year, what will happen to this program? Will it still be around? What about the stuff that was all in motion before that? Is all of that stuff just going to be stopped like a train on the tracks? Or is this something that will have demonstrated enough success that other funders, maybe it's public, maybe it's private, will step in and support this program because they've seen the impact? And honestly, it's a rare day when I can say unequivocally that this program demonstrated sustainable and impactful success, so that moving forward, this IET model in our region has been supported by other organizations locally, and the funding has been secured outside the Workforce Board because of how successful this was. So the IU13 in Lebanon and Lancaster counties in South Central Pennsylvania, for instance, they've received additional funding from local various community-based organizations, foundations, and agencies that want to invest in the IET program. And to me, that's one of the best examples of success. It's when the funding and the support is viewed by the community as something that they want to support. So that was just a little example with the IET program of how the South Central PA Works and Adult Education Coalition really work together on that. At any point too, as we start to get towards the end of this webinar here in the next 5 to 10 minutes or so, is I would love to be able to share more resources and more information about the IET program specifically, but I want to reiterate that it's less about selling IET, integrated education and training, and much more about become a local problem solver, build a network where you're around other problem solvers, and figure out what best practice solution, which probably exists somewhere already, what would be good for you to bring that into your region and your community, and work with your workforce board if it's relevant to do something like that. And you'll see IET type programs start to pop up in some really cool ways. So what's next for us working together? I think it's important for us to sort of pause here and consider that really the future of work and the future of work that we've talked about, particularly in COVID-19, is particularly important. The elements of equity and inclusion, I think, are probably more relevant now than they have been in a long time. The folks that we're serving here in South Central Pennsylvania need opportunities. In some cases, they need second chances or third chances. In some cases, they've not been afforded the same pathways or been resourced in a way that is appropriately set them up for success. I think when you see that on top of how work is changing, who is still working under COVID-19 and who is laid off, who is displaced, I think will give you a little bit of a proxy for what we're talking about with how work and the nature and the future of work is changing. So when we talk about equity and inclusion, I'm sure I'm again preaching to the choir here, but I think basic foundational education is one of the greatest ways that we can help build service delivery mechanisms in our communities and institutions that really support equity and inclusion for all people in our community, especially those that are most at risk. I also think it's really important for us to share the good work that we're doing. Success has a way of breeding success. And I think a lot of times we get so caught up in our work, our day-to-day work, that we forget about the successes that we've had together. Back when I talked before about the theory of change and the framework for how we can work together, some of it is communication and sharing of success and sharing of data that we can do as a workforce board, as adult education, but also at the community at large. So think about the ways in which over the past 6 months, you have shared the good work that you're doing, and that you can partner with organizations that are also doing really good work. I also think that in the times where there are many platforms to have a voice, one of the best ways to highlight or to draw attention to the work that you're doing is to do it collectively. So we've been talking locally about not just having an organizational focused social media platform, but rather a platform that we share with other like-minded institutions. That's where you build campaigns. That's where you build, the hashtags that get people's attention, is not when it's one organization, but truly when you have a series of organizations that are all saying the same thing, that are all sharing the good success together, and are all promoting it and pointing it to the same places, right? Here's what workforce boards can do in partnership with HAC, Harrisburg Area Community College, or the York Literacy Council, or IU13. You get a whole bunch of other partners in there saying that same thing and telling that same story. I think we'll have a lot of success breeding success. Finally, I also wanted to bring this up too, because we are probably not that far away from talking about WIOA reauthorization or something with regards to that here in the next year or two. There's other federal advocacy with adult education programs that absolutely needs to happen, but thinking about we're more powerful together with regards to federal advocacy. And I think COABE is extremely well positioned, and I've been so impressed with Sharon and her team with regards to getting in front of congressmen and congresswomen, getting in front of the right folks, not only in Washington, but across the country in terms of state and local leadership, for advocating for the programs that actually work. My challenge to workforce board folks that may be on this webinar is, have you reached out to your local adult education providers and literacy councils and other institutions that are doing this great work on the daily, and saying, how do we help you with regards to federal or state advocacy? We need to tell our story, and we need to be doing it a lot better than we are now. But kudos to COABE and for Sharon's leadership with regards to telling that story, I think, in a really powerful way. So again, just in conclusion here, to revisit with our takeaways from today's webinar, and I hope we've steered and navigated these waters pretty well. The work that we're doing together is so important. It would be important outside of a pandemic, but I think considering the nature of how things have changed and the displacement that's happened across the country, it's never been more important for us to work together. And just remember, operational efficiencies, you working more with your workforce board and vice versa, isn't just to make your life easier or to have better, things better organized or your paperwork in place. It's really geared towards the customer that we're serving. We have to do right by our adult learners and our job seekers in our community. Hopefully you've walked away with a couple steps to build a better relationship with your local workforce board. If you haven't already, find out who's on your workforce board, find out when they meet, attend a meeting, reach out to the local contacts at the American Job Centers where these services are actually delivered, and talk with them about what are ways we can help. How can we help you? How can the collaboration happen in a better, more powerful way? Tangible ways to collaborate. We're looking at operational data sharing, success stories, identify some ways that you can locate some funding, either locally or nationally, and go to your workforce board and say, there's a best practice out here that such and such a workforce board is doing in Texas. We should be doing that here in Iowa. The example of the model program, again, I think it's a really great lesson learned for us in South Central Pennsylvania with working with our Adult Ed Coalition. The grant was a huge success. People got the learning that they needed and the jobs after they were finished the program. And most importantly, that program is continuing because of the sustainability and the impact that we demonstrated during that time. And then future ways to work together. And I would love to continue conversations about ways of advocacy, whether it's legislation or other policy that we can be doing together between workforce boards and adult education. So with that, that's what I wanted to present today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all here on this webinar. What I'll do is I'll turn it back to our hosts, and what I'll do here is just say if there's any opportunities for questions or comments, I'd be happy to take 5 or 10 minutes here and chat through some of those. So thanks again for having me, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Jesse, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much. We do have several questions. If you want to take a few minutes to open up the Q&A box and just kind of go through them one by one, we've definitely got some time for that.
That would be great. Thanks, James. So, James, you have on the Q&A side of things. Should I just start here from the top?
Yeah, you can start at the top or the bottom and work your way up, and I'll just check them off as answered as you speak to each one.
That sounds good. I'll also say this too: if I don't get to all these questions or I don't do a great job at answering them, I'd be happy to answer them in the next day or so in some way to be helpful. So the first question here is: how can you interest workforce boards in better supporting special populations like those that are ESL, disabled, or justice involved? Kelsey, thanks for the question. I think at the end of the day, workforce boards really should be interested in better supporting these special populations. And one thing that I'll note is that one thing that COVID has changed, or I'm hoping hasn't changed, is a better way to put it, is before all of this, we had so much interest from employers back in January and February, more interest than ever, of employers reaching out to us and saying, hey, we want to work with the workforce board. How can you all help us? We can't find people. And so remember, a lot of businesses are being driven in that way of if they can't find skilled workers, then they're in panic mode. That's when the ESL populations or justice involved populations all of a sudden were more appealing to businesses than they might otherwise have been. My concern in all of this is that that changes at a time when there are now more workers than there are jobs. I think the best thing to do is to reach out to the workforce boards and assume that they are interested and say, we want to do a better job at serving these special populations. What are you working on? How are you tackling this? What are your strategies? And open up a conversation with them. I think they will be really interested in continuing that. What are silos? Do you want me to answer that? Or it looks like Shanti was going to answer that. But since I got the mic, silos, I believe, are the big circular buildings on a farm where they would store wheat or grain. And so silos are basically just separated out segments, like think containers that don't work with each other, that don't mix or don't interact at all. So to break down silos means that we have some cross-pollination that happen between organizations as opposed to them just staying in their bin. Hopefully that might have been a terrible explanation of what a silo is, but someone will correct me if it is. Thanks for that question. In DC, roughly 72% of people who CASAS test are at American Job Centers don't meet an 8th grade math or reading level. Dirk, thank you for that point. 72%. That's incredible. I don't know what this is across the country, and I'm trying to think now if I know the number in South Central Pennsylvania, and I don't know if I do. But you see how the population that we're serving and that you all are serving are in large part probably very similar. It's a great point, and it just shows the importance of us working collaboratively. If someone comes to a literacy council and is testing at an 8th grade math and reading level, then our career advisors at the American Job Centers need to know that so that we better position our work and the training that we want to put them in that will be appropriate for that 8th grade math reading level. And careers are going to be built when those reading levels and literacy levels go way up from there. Great point. Susan, thanks for your question about the graphics. Education levels of workers. No, absolutely, you can use them. And I don't know if the references, they probably got cut off of my PowerPoint because I had to use images. National Skills Coalition was where I got the education level of workers versus education needed for jobs. If you go into nationalskillscoalition.org, I think that's the website, you should be able to find all that information there under adult education. So yeah, National Skills Coalition is a great resource. Let's see. We've got a PIACC literacy and numeracy numbers from Chris. Thanks for sharing that. Christy, we have very few adults interested in employability. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that, but yeah, I think the ESL learners with advanced degrees, but English is a great barrier, and the time needed to improve English for employability is months to years at a time. That's a great point. We've heard from businesses that say, we've got a group of workers, great workers, that need ESL skills, and they want to contextualize that learning on site. So maybe a worker finishes a shift, or right before a shift, there's a little bit of classroom time or a little bit of learning, and particularly that ESL learning is targeted for their occupation. And again, we've worked with our Adult Education Coalition to deliver some of that training. I think it's a great point. We're not patient people, and learning another language is really difficult, by the way, when you're supporting a family and working 40+ hours a week. So these are not easy solutions to tackle, for sure. Great point. Maureen's comment, the complicated parts are Department of Labor versus Department of Education priorities. Yep, you are spot on, Maureen. Hardest alignment for programs that serve those still learning English or lacking higher level literacy skills. Yep, competing priorities is it's a great point. A lot more to talk about there, but I think that that's something we've got to consider, that collaboration becomes more difficult when what gets measured gets done, and those things that are being measured are different. Philip, I have this wonderfully captive audience in prison. These guys are about 18 months from being released. Basic strategy is to really talk up the AJCs and WIOA training. What more can I do? Philip, you are already doing, I don't want to say more than you should, but you're doing more than a lot of people do. And kudos to you for your heart of service to that population being released. I think the thing to do would be make sure that the person at the American Job Center is aware that you're saying that, and potentially even building a relationship with someone on the workforce board side to say, when I go in, I'm talking up WIOA training, you all need to make sure that you're ready to receive them when they come out. The other thing too is that I don't know if it's happening locally, but a lot of programs need to be or should be being delivered in that 6 to 18 month before release, so that upon release, they are ready to go, and they've already met the American Job Center person, they've already met the case managers and advisors, so that they're ready to go from day one. I know we're running right up against 3 o'clock here, so I'll take one more question or comment here. Let's see. Vicky's comment, collaboration is an unfunded mandate. Takes staff time and energy, and therefore organizational money to forge and maintain collaborative partnerships. Why do you think there is so little public or private funding to specifically support these partnerships and collaboration in addition to programs and services? That is it's a well-worded comment and question, Vicki. I think because collaboration is hard to measure, it's not funded. What's easier to measure is I put this person and I enrolled them in my program, or this person finished the test and now I gave them the certificate of completion, or they got a job, didn't get a job. It's a little bit easier to measure. But you're right, collaboration it's an unfunded mandate. We have to do it, and we know when we're doing it well, but it's kind of hard to measure. And I think one of the challenges is there isn't a lot of funding and support for these more nebulous ideas or concepts that are so critical to the work that we're doing. So it really takes community leaders that say, I know it's an unfunded mandate, but we want to do right by our job seekers and by our learners to do that. So I'll stop there. Thank you again so much. Great comments and questions. I apologize I couldn't get to everything. And if we want to answer these questions afterward, James or Sharon, I'd be happy to do so. So thank you so much. And I appreciate being a part of this today.
Thank you so much, Jesse. And I just want to say thank you to Shanti from Empire OneFlow again for sponsoring today's webinar. Without their support, this wouldn't be possible. So thank you so much. And thank you for everybody for attending. It was a great presentation.
Thank you all. And if you want to find out more about how our platform can support your collaboration, please visit our website at myoneflow.com, and you can go to the contact page to reach out to us and get a meeting. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone.